HO Talk Show. Yes, Max, we are joined in studio by our own, Jason Melendez. We see this young brother all around town, and he has so obliged us to be a political correspondent for us regularly. We've seen the brother monthly now for the past couple months.
It was the third time, right? It's the third time.
I believe so.
Tell us something new.
There's plenty to work with.
That's right. Yeah. So, but we really appreciate that, because these news headlines, politics are weighing so heavy right now. Jason, of course, this is an election year locally. Local and state government, and just federally, we're only just a few months into the new, presidency, but so much has already changed. And so that's why there's so much to cover within that regard. But what you got for us today, Jason? Like what's top of mind? Like, what are the bullet points that we should discuss for the good people?
Yeah, we just passed 100 days into this new White House, and I didn't realize 100 days could actually be this long. It feels like we've been doing this for ages already, because the headlines, have just continued to come. In terms of what I'm hearing from the community, definitely a lot of immigration-related concerns. Of course, we have a large refugee population here, a large immigrant population in Charlottesville. So that's been top of mind for a lot of folks, especially with what happened at the courthouse on the 22nd of April.
Okay, what happened?
So that was where we had it was plainclothes ICE agents that detained two individuals coming out of Albemarle General District Court. And there was a lot of concerns around that, because you have plainclothes federal agents coming into a Virginia state courthouse, fully masked. And there's due process concerns. There's concerns about whether that's even the right way to go about any sort of that thing like that, because it looked like a kidnapping. That's really kind of what I would define it as a kidnapping.
Did they identify themselves?
They claim they did. So there's been a back and forth between ICE and between the sheriff's office and some of the other folks in the county. We haven't seen this issue pop up in the city yet, so I'm being curious. It seems that the city of Charlottesville has been pretty clear on where it stands. So we haven't seen that happen in the city, but I know there's been a large back and forth, and I think the sheriff is continuing to look at it. The Commonwealth's attorney is continuing to look at it in the county. So hopefully we'll know more soon, but it's been pretty opaque so far.
How much authority do we really have here? We may not like it, but...
Yeah, our options are limited. Some people say that it's up to the judges to determine what kind of enforcement activity goes on in the courthouse. I was actually recently talking with a clerk in another locality, a much larger locality in Virginia. I was sharing that their judges really don't want that kind of enforcement activity happening in their courthouse. Of course, a lot of our judges here are Rob Bell appointees. So that some of them are Rob Bell appointees. So we don't quite know exactly which way they would land when they're thinking about this sort of thing. But I think this will have both sheriffs, both James and Shan, think more critically
City
about
and county sheriffs.
think more critically about courthouse security and what happens at the interaction with federal law enforcement.
Yeah, and Max, even if it's not legally that much we can do, like I think we're seeing this across the board when it comes to different aspects of the overreach of our federal government. Mind you, a leadership who traditionally runs on smaller government, right? But the only thing that they're trying to cut is like benefits and services. Like that's the only thing that's small is just to cut to that. But or the only thing is getting smaller. But Max, though, it's like I don't know if you saw the video. There was a young lady, the university student, I think it was the Columbia student. The surveillance cam saw her walking down the street, and correct me if I'm wrong on her location, but I believe it was in New York. But the surveillance cam caught her walking down the street and saw these guys, unmarked, unidentified, walk up to her and grab her like they were ICE agents, but they were unidentified. And I'm sitting here as a parent, as a father.
It looks like they're kidnapping.
Straight like abduction, kidnapping, and good for the people that were brave enough. People nearby that saw it and stopped them. I was like, what are you doing to this young girl? She's college age. And then they said, oh, we're with ICE and all that stuff.
And that's precisely
you imagine the number of people that could impersonate these type of situations.
Well, and that's been happening. That is happening now.
Yeah.
But and that also layers in a whole other concern. When this happens at a courthouse like the Albemarle County Courthouse, you're talking about potential trials that are going on where you might have witnesses that could be targeted. that might, maybe right for kidnapping. If somebody wanted to put that kind of attack out there on a witness that's vital to a prosecution. So there's a lot of consequences to this can of worms that's now been opened. Whether it's for witnesses, whether it's for defendants who may be now less likely to appear, even on minor cases that are coming before general district court. Yeah, my understanding is that they were both undocumented individuals. I don't know what their criminal history is or prior interactions are with the judiciary. I believe my understanding is both of them that were at court for that day both had charges dismissed. So
and that's
only to come out and then be detained by federal agents instead.
And that's always the case, though, is that like these little loopholes, because there have been some folks who have been detained or at least questioned for no good reason, but there's some who in traditional ways, they have been here illegally, like whether it's student visa, work visa, things like that, but they may not be a citizen, quote unquote, right? Like, so there's been different instances to where it's like these folks, though, aren't committing any crimes. Like they're otherwise like contributing citizens, whether that be as a student or like to our workforce, whatever the case is. So it's still this mass like overreach. That's just disgusting.
I mean, and it's, getting to the point now where the Republicans in Virginia want to see state police and local law enforcement assist ICE. And I don't see that there's a role for local law enforcement to be assisting ICE. The federal government has expressed interest to undertake this awful series of events in terms of mass deportations and these kinds of street-style kidnappings. That is something that the federal government is going to need to contend with, that we're going to have to continue to fight in court. I mean, local law enforcement need to do their regular jobs in our communities, doing beneficial things rather than supporting ICE. And I know that's been another parallel concern as well in the county when it came to there was a component that there may have been some ACPD officers doing welfare checks with ICE. So there's been some dialogue around that as well in terms of how that practice will evolve or ultimately hopefully end. Again, this is not something that we see in the city. So this is an example of the city and the county of our police departments are taking different angles here.
Yeah. And Max, remember we had a free speech conversation not long ago in here, and that's also that's what's in danger and what's a threat. It's like if you say the wrong things, if you have too many people listening to you and following, they don't like how you're moving, like this gives them sort of like open rein to come in and be like, like say like that you're a threat, to our national security or what have you. Even the gentleman who it's that very controversial arrest of a gentleman that was sent to the prison in El Salvador, where some folks even saying that the whole MS-13 tattoo was photoshopped, right? This is a gentleman that had no criminal history, but somehow got tagged with being a dangerous gang member.
Well, it was here legally, no criminal history.
Exactly, here legally, no criminal history. Okay. But the part we also can't forget about this is that we have, the Department of Justice that appeared in various levels of the federal judiciary saying, okay, we shouldn't have deported this person. We have judges saying this person needs to come back. The Supreme Court affirming that. And you have the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, and the President all saying they're not going to do any of that. And that is the prime issue here is we're looking at a constitutional crisis. And the way I think about it, and I heard Congresswoman McClellan put it this way on the floor when she was speaking the other day, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the United States, U.S. independence. And it's starting to wonder whether we're going to be looking more like at a funeral or a mourning ceremony rather than an anniversary when we look at how the Constitution is being perverted by conservatives in office. Yeah.
Now, before we go too deep down the Charlottesville thing, y'all remember when Mr. Signer was the mayor, like a lot of the sanctuary town, the safe haven city stuff led to a lot of trouble as far as like his reputation, his image, right? Like a lot of folks wanted to fight back against that, thought that Charlottesville was this beacon of democracy, right? And like so that led to a lot of the August 12th stuff and whatnot. So I'm curious, is there like a fear right now locally of people being too boisterous, like standing up for that level of democracy?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of different angles on it. Like I've heard a lot of people say, Charlottesville needs to be diligent in how it navigates the spotlight, because Charlottesville is not a stranger to being in the spotlight. I didn't live in Charlottesville when what happened in 2017 happened, so I can only imagine. But I know you both were here. So, I mean, I think that's part of the dialogue, but I think there are also a number of folks that want to see at the granular level, our local elected officials, our state elected officials do what's right because that's what's in our control, in our domain. You know, we can only do so much about Washington at the current moment, but we can at least push back locally. And I think that's what's been helpful so far.
Gotcha.
I mean, I guess I'm going to say something very unpopular here, but I mean, I know that I am. I'm sure that there is a way to conduct this effort in a very humane, safe, and fair manner. But if there are individuals no different than, you know, if dare I say deportation, when one of us gets ripped off the street and placed in a jail or prison because of because of us pumping drugs into our community or taking lives and senseless violence in our community or different things like that, you know, if there are crimes individuals are committing crimes, creating a less safe place for us to live, if individuals are in our city illegally, I think that still needs to be addressed. I think there's a proper way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we got the due process element for that.
Addressed.
Yeah, and that's why we got the due process element. You know, if you're being tried on a felony, and chances are you're going to be, you know, remanded to state custody at that point. You know, the likelihood that from that point on is if you are here unlawfully, chances are you probably are going to be deported. As for if you know, and I think there's got to be some sort of gradation. You know, here, like, you know, if you get a speeding ticket and you maybe it happened to be 86 miles an hour and they charge you with reckless driving just because they can, you know, that probably shouldn't be a reason to deport somebody. But
Sure.
you know, when we're talking about, you know, felonies and we move into, you know, some of the more particular crimes I think folks, you know, may have concerns with, that's why we have the whole due process element there. And I think that's, I mean, the White House's position that people that are undocumented don't have due process is problematic because we've never had that position before. We've always assumed that everyone here, whether you're here visiting, whether you're a citizen, whether you're undocumented or not, that you have access to due process when you're interacting with the courts.
What makes that the trickiest, right, even more tricky now, is that you have a government that doesn't even seem to respect its own rules.
Yeah,
like they are bypassing like Constitution at every step.
Charles, we are so far past that.
So, but my point is then how can we expect citizens or the people to respect the law when those?
Well, and that's my ultimate point when I mentioned, you know, how the White House is not willing to listen to the judges that have ruled on the case of Kilmar Garcia. Is, you know, if the White House isn't willing to listen to judges, then why should anybody else listen to a judge? If they get a speeding ticket and they go in and they get, you know, a disposition on their case, why should they listen to the judge if the president won't even listen to a judge?
Now, to that point, the Constitution, since we brought that up, and we are talking to Jason Melendez, political strategist. So I've been hearing talk about a constitutional convention, and apparently I think it was 1817 that was done because the country, meaning the government and the people, were sort of like so wayward and felt like that maybe they like didn't align or they were out of alignment so much with the Constitution to where our representatives determined that we needed a constitutional convention, which was to readdress, maybe make amendments to see what changes needed to be made for it to fit our people better for that time. So I'm hearing this talk now, Jason, and I think you may be a little familiar with that. Like, what is the realistic possibility of this country having a constitutional convention?
I would say probably next to none. I mean, there have been people that have beaten that drum for a long time. The way I liken it is, you know, you can hardly get 50 people to go in a Starbucks and agree on one order together, let alone 34, which is what you need to actually get some amendments out of that convention. So, you know, in this particular moment, I don't see that being as the viable path. What I wish was the viable path was that we would simply just have in elected office leaders who respect the foundation that we have set, at least at a bare minimum, incapable of compromise. I mean, the underlying budget is still a decent foundation, but it's very clear that Governor Youngkin is realizing, and maybe he's not willing to say it publicly, but he's realizing that revenue in Virginia is going to decline with the chaos that's going on in DC. And when we are losing federal jobs in Virginia and federal contractors are losing their contracts in Virginia, it is going to not be great for state government. And, lose $900 million of spending that's impacting all sorts of things, whether it's entitlement programs, K-12 education, to lose money for capital projects. This is a big deal. And, it's, even in Charlottesville, we lost the money for the shelter.
What shelter says?
The low barrier shelter that the city was looking to get built. It was going to be $1.5 million in state matching funds that the governor also line item vetoed, as well as money for Biscuit Run, a trail connecting Biscuit Run and the Monacan Park that's going to be built down there. So Charlottesville, lost out some money with these vetoes as well. But it paints a troubling sign for what comes next for these next few months, fiscally. And I know the city is experiencing this as well as it works through implementing the budget. I believe it just adopted in the budget. It's starting to craft for the next cycle. Things are going to get tough. Some projects are probably going to end up, having to go by the wayside. And it reminds me a lot of, 2008 and 2009. And it's unfortunate because we didn't have to be in this position either.
How do you project that these cuts may impact our benefits like TANF, SNAP, food stamps?
Yeah, so at the federal level, if they move forward with their budget plan, we're going to see folks probably ultimately, there are going to be at least a portion of folks getting kicked off of their food stamp benefits and their TANF benefits. They made it pretty clear that they're willing to sacrifice. Republicans have made it in Congress very clear that they're willing to sacrifice that kind of money. They don't see it as important. They don't see it as important to help, young mothers that might be pregnant that can't work and need access to TANF or food stamps. They don't view those things as important. They don't view Medicaid as important. So it's going to be pretty dark ahead. And ideally, this is where we would want the state to step up and say, what can we do as a state to bring in programs to help people? But we can only do that with sound revenue, and we can't bring in sound revenue if all around us, Virginia's economy is so dependent on the federal government that we're losing money as a state. So we have some real thinking to do in these next few years ahead. Because I don't think this is just the beginning. And I saw that Congressman McGuire was here over the weekend in Charlottesville. I really would hope that he would host a town hall, because I think there are a lot of committee members that have questions about some of the federal spending things going on, whether it's research programs at UVA, whether it's health research at UVA Health, whether it's what happened at FEI, which, thankfully the city turned that into a good thing by purchasing FEI for I believe free, or just taking it off of the department's hands.
That was big.
The layoffs at Shenandoah National Park. The list goes on. Money lost to Ready Kids, money lost to Piedmont Housing Alliance. So I wish McGuire would actually come to Charlottesville and host a town hall, because that'd be really nice.
Now, the piece you said about the cutting, though, the hope from some was that you cut the wasteful government spending, and that is supposed to generate jobs. It's supposed to boost the economy, because then you have to contract workers instead of them just being, government employees. Like, is that happening? Is that working out?
It seems to not be the case. In Virginia, what we're on track to do is erase jobs growth that we've had over the last few years. And it's really going to take a hit on our revenue estimates in terms of tax revenue that we're bringing on income tax. And the other thing is, think about Virginia is for unemployment insurance. We don't have, we didn't, I believe up until this year, we didn't have protections for contractors. So if you're a federal contractor and you got laid off, you're kind of screwed. So, we're working on fixing that. But then again, the unemployment disbursement in Virginia is not very high per week. So I think folks are going to start to realize, it's going to start to come into perspective very quickly. I think for many folks in Northern Virginia, it's starting to come into perspective really quickly, especially. I've had friends that worked at FEI, that got laid off, and it was kind of very haphazard. Executive order was signed and then the building was shut down. So, where did it even begin, honestly?
Yeah, you're right. We are talking to Jason Melendez, political strategist here, IMHO Talk Show. So our good friends over at Charlottesville tomorrow, had an article recently too about there seems to be a little bit of confusion as far as what's expected from the police and citizens like overview board and like the oversight board, like when it comes to like what's expected from them. I'm not sure if you've been a part of any of those conversations, but like when it comes to police and citizens oversight boards, yeah, I'm kind of curious on the stance of those, maybe statewide, or if there's something peculiar to Charlottesville and specific issues are we seeing at other places?
Yeah, I'll say there's not many across Virginia to begin with, so I wouldn't really know where to model it from. But I mean, in terms of what I've heard and what I've seen, in terms of the articles about the PCOB here in Charlottesville, there seems to be just some sort of disconnect to getting it in a smooth running, fashion.
Yeah.
Compared to other localities that I know have also implemented them. And I don't know what the catalyst is necessarily to fix that. I don't know if that's something that council needs to kind of intervene on and really set the tone. I don't know if that happens from the city management level. I don't know really kind of what's going to crack that. But the PCOB, since we have it, we should ideally want it to be a functional, entity. And I don't know if that's what we could call it currently at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, I hear regular conversations where the police department, the evaluation of them seems to be that they're doing a fine job. Is that what you hear when you talk to people in the community?
Generally, yeah. I think there's a disconnect maybe between the product and the byproduct of the work that's coming out of the agencies, maybe not so much aligned with what people are seeing out of the actual board itself. I think people view the board as maybe not as functional at this current moment. But, I think there's still important work to be done. So I'm hoping that evolves over time. I know there's vacancies, I think, on that board, maybe still. So hopefully, as new board members cycle in, they can kind of find their footing and build that productive relationship with the department.
We've had them on here multiple times, Razor. Like, like through the different evolutions of the PCOB, the Police Civilian Oversight Board there's a reason
I applied to be on the Human Rights Commission, not PCOB.
And it's like, but it's still trying to gain traction though. But we remember we're also dealing with the government, like that doesn't want checks and balances, right? Like whatever they say is truth. You're not allowed to fact check.
Can I fill in the blanks for you a little bit?
Just to clarify,
that's why I'm kicking it to you.
Does not have any vacancies.
Okay, got you.
Sorry, all right. Well, let me help y'all fill in a little bit of the blanks. The reason that there's a disconnect is because if you go use the PCOB, you cannot talk to the police chief to try to solve your problem. You cannot talk to the city manager to solve your problem. It's set that way. So if you're doing anything with the PCOB that's supposed to be an oversight on the situations that you have, they're not allowed to talk to you. And that's in their rules and regulations.
Gotcha.
So that's the problem. And if anybody wants to know how I know, I can give you a case number that definitely will let you know that. So that's the problem. They know the problem exists and they're not going to fix the problem because there's this thing called accountability. At that point, all your eggs are on the table.
So whose place is it to fix it though? Is that police or is that city council?
No. It's the product. It's almost like the legal system. It's not broken. It's set to be what it's supposed to be. Nobody wants somebody over top your shoulder telling you how to do your job and critiquing you. And in all honesty, the police department does the best job that they can do with what they're working with at times. You know what I'm saying? And that means the people that work for them as well. The new officers coming in, who some of them want to make a difference, some of them want to have a job. And the police chief has to try to balance all that and try to make the community happy, right? But we have to remember,
Chief has done a pretty good
he's
job.
done a good job. Like honest to God, he's done a good job. But this is a business. I was reminded that by somebody who I trust extremely well, right? This is a business all in all. And when it comes down to, is it good business for us to do X, Y, Z, even though you may have a problem with the PCOB not being able to do their job, what the police department may or may not have done to you in that situation, there's nothing that can be done because it's a business. And if it doesn't fit the narrative, it doesn't fit.
So Razor, so I hear what you're saying, but my question still stands though, is still who does that fall on? Is it like city council still administers the rules and regulations for the PCOB? Is that who the
when they write out the bylaws by which the PCOB operates by, the young lady who's running it has the answers to be able to fix it honestly.
Okay.
Nobody's listening to her. And that's my humble opinion, right? And to make sure everybody understand that that's my personal opinion. I think that the person who was brought here knows how to run it correctly, but I think that our hands are tied because she runs it correctly. Accountability is going to be had.
Yeah.
So whose responsibility is it? It's nobody's. That's the problem.
But it's always the people's responsibility, like to press
The
their
people have no
representative.
The people have no voice in this.
I feel you, but what I'm saying is that's how we vote, though, is to say, city council, we need our PCOB to do this, or we're gonna vote for somebody that will
Can't do
this.
it because it don't fit the narrative. Like we just moving in figureheads. It don't matter if it's white, black, Hispanic, green, yellow.
So you're saying that we won't find a candidate because that then brings accountability onto that candidate.
Yeah, we won't do that. Like nobody has the power solely to go against what needs to be done. And it's no different than any other government all the way up to the presidency. You know, most of the time he's a figurehead and the person behind the curtain with the wingtip shoes is the one in control. Charlottesville's the same way.
Wingtip shoes.
Yeah. That's how far I go back.
I feel you. But we are up against the hour though. But Jason, what else that you want folks to know before we close out this segment with you, good sir?
Well, I'll say early voting has begun.
Yes, primaries.
There's not many Republican primaries going on across the state, but there are a ton of Democratic primaries going on across the state, including for lieutenant governor, attorney general. And here in Charlottesville, we've got a city council Democratic primary. In Albemarle, the Jack Jewett supervisor seat has a Democratic primary as well. So early voting going on through June 14th, and primary election day on June 17th. So if you are a Democrat, at least in the Charlottesville area, get out and vote between now and then. It's going to be pretty interesting. The first ranked choice voting election in Charlottesville. So we'll see kind of what the outcome. I know you guys have had former Delegate Hudson on the show before to talk about RCV. So we'll see kind of what the outcomes are of that as folks get acclimated to it. But it seems to be that folks are getting used to it so far. I filled out my ballot. I was actually the second voter on Friday for early voting. First voter was Vice Mayor Pinkston, so he beat me there by a little bit. I'm not a morning person. Yeah, I'm not a morning person by nature, but it was very seamless to go ahead and fill out that ballot. There are other folks that feel as though RCV might seem complicated. There's a lot of math to it. Certainly, there's a lot of math to it. But in terms of for the voter actually showing up, it's a pretty seamless process. 1, 2, or 3. I mean, it couldn't be much easier than that. So,
do you mind taking a few minutes to be a little more specific as far as the city council elections that are taking place this year? So we have 3 candidates. Maybe if you could just speak briefly about the candidates, what their platforms are.
Yeah, so just first, before I even dive in that, I'll disclose that I do some consulting work for Juan Diego Wade and Brian Pinkston, so that it might certainly influence how I feel about the race. But we've got 3 candidates, 2 open seats. Mayor Juan Diego Wade's running for re-election, Vice Mayor Pinkston running for re-election, and Jen Flesher is challenging both of them in the Democratic primary here. All 3 phenomenal candidates, great folks. Juan Diego Wade is absolutely, I believe, a great person to have on the city council, especially, we don't see a ton of Black elected representation in Charlottesville. We're lucky to have a few Black elected officials in the school board, but only 1 Black city councilor. And we're lucky to have a mixed racial delegate. But, we don't have a ton of Black political representation in Charlottesville. So I think it is important that we, in my view, reelect Juan Diego Wade. I've also voted for Brian Pinkston, of course I did. But Jen Flesher, I think, also brings a fresh voice to city council. So I think
there's 2 seats.
Yeah, 2 seats. Right. So someone's got to go. Someone's not going to make it.
Somebody got to go.
In my mind, and in terms of the way I approach my vote, my support for Brian and for Juan, is the importance of all the work that they've done these last few years in terms of the zoning ordinance, getting Buford Middle School construction project off the ground, something that, in my understanding, has been worked on since the 90s. Their work on hopefully trying to get us to this homeless shelter built. All the businesses that have been attracted to Charlottesville over their tenure. Charlottesville is really growing quickly, and I think City Council is a really good place right now. And especially as we see this chaos on the horizon, personally, I want to keep that stable, tested leadership these next 4 years at least. That way we can continue to build on the progress that we've made. But I think, again, all three candidates are phenomenal folks.
And shameless plug, IMHO is partnering with the next installment of Can I Talk to You, Seville, end of the month, May 27th. Jason will be there. The folks he's naming will be there at Jefferson School Auditorium.
Yes.
On local government, who's governing Charlottesville. So May 27th, y'all can go on our pages as well as the Vinegar Hill page, Seville Tomorrow pages, and register. You know, because we want to know how many folks there. They're going to be food. It's going to be family friendly.
That's the important part, the food.
Yeah, right. And family friendly too. Like, so if you say you don't got childcare, that's not an excuse. You know, all that stuff. So yeah. So
I think in this
definitely come
moment,
talk
we
to the people.
need kids to show up to town halls,
That's right.
local government town halls, and understand the importance of local government and civic engagement. I mean, we need that now more than ever. So I'm glad that you guys have gone out your way to make this a family friendly event and be able to folks bring kids. So
Yeah, appreciate that. And I'm glad Max brought that up too, because I have a quick question too as we close. What's the thought process behind like co-campaigning, right? Because Juan or Brian could have ran individually, right? But they decided to stick together as mayor and vice mayor and defend those seats. I'm curious the thought process behind
so I'll say there's a few things. One, they just have a lot of shared respect for each other. They've gone through a transition period in the city council where we went from a period of extreme instability to now a period in which we have a fabulous city manager and things are moving in the right direction. We've got a police chief. I think, did we just bring on a city attorney as well? So things are moving in the right direction for the city. So that it first starts at the basis of shared respect. The other thing is a little bit more strategic in terms of our ability to, I'll say our, because I'm part of it, I guess, our ability to fundraise together. So, in terms of, we've held a number of fundraising events throughout the year. In terms of a money breakdown in the race, this puts them at in terms of the last fiscal report for campaigns, I think 11-1 spending advantage compared to their opponent. So they're allowed to advertise with each other, get their name out there together. It seemed to have been effective so far. We're hoping that the investments we've made in terms of getting the information about RCV, in terms of yard signs, mailers. I mean, both Juan and Brian have been knocking on doors. Knocked over more than 2,500 doors since the beginning of the year. So we're hoping that all makes a difference as we go into it. Gotcha. They want to continue doing this work together. They view that they've had an extraordinary success as mayor and vice mayor these last 2 years or this last year, and going into this year as well, but throughout their entire term. So they want to continue that. Yeah,
awesome. And you mentioned Jim Fleischer, but I believe some uncontested seats would be Sheriff Brown, Attorney General Joe Platania. The delegates, Cree Deeds and Katrina Carlson. But then, following up the summer too, IMHO will also be a part of discussions, public forums with our school board and school board representatives that I know there's 3 seats available for that one, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe
that ought to be interesting.
I believe Amanda Burns, Emily Dooley, Lisa Torres, and then new folks to the school board scene, at least, but not new to the area, which is Ayanna Bryant and Deshaun Cooper. So the school board race this year is going to be quite.
I think it'll be more interesting to watch than the city council primary this time around. This Democratic primary this year is going to be interesting. We don't have a top of the ticket primary. Neither party does actually in Virginia this year. So there's no gubernatorial primaries going on. So only your hardcore Democrats are probably showing up by default to vote for lieutenant governor candidates and attorney general candidates. And
the state.
So for the primaries, so that might be a little bit interesting, these outcomes, which is where I think both Juan and Brian are very well positioned because of their continued involvement in Democratic politics in the area and their incumbency advantage. So
and a state election is important, people.
It is.
It's super important. Folks talking about what's going on here locally and how UVA relates to it.
I think there's no more election that's important. Well, of course, gubernatorial election is going to be important. Absolutely. Number one. But number 2 to that, the attorney general. We've got to elect an attorney general that does not want to be a sidekick to the U.S. attorney general and to the White House. And that's what we have currently. The Department of Justice has been going after UVA, nonstop. I guess it's probably almost a daily habit for them. We need a Virginia Attorney General that's going to fight back. In my mind, the person who I believe is best positioned for that coming out of the Democratic primary is Jay Jones. There is another candidate race, Henrico Commonwealth's attorney, Shannon Taylor. But I think Jay Jones is best positioned to lead us through this next few years of intense what will be intense civil litigation, fighting back against the federal government on all sorts of issues.
And why do you say that?
Well, I think Jay's background in civil law is exactly what we need at this moment. He's a former assistant attorney general in Washington, D.C. He's a former delegate here in Virginia. He's a skilled attorney, UVA law educated as well. And Shannon Taylor, absolutely also highly educated, actually hails from Albemarle originally.
Okay.
But she is a Henrico County Commonwealth attorney. I think in this moment, I don't want to see a prosecutor step into that role because I don't want to see an expansion of the Virginia Attorney General's office as a prosecutorial arm. That's not what we need to treat it like, because that's not what it's supposed to be. We need an attorney general that is understanding of the role and what it takes at this particular moment, which is going to be civil litigation against the federal government when they come after things like UVA or come after our local school divisions, as they're already doing. That's the strong suit. That's what we need at this moment. So Shannon's great, but I think Jay is better positioned to lead us.
Gotcha.
And to be a younger voice. And probably Virginia's first black attorney general. Probably almost certainly. I don't think Virginia's ever had a black attorney general. So if we can elect Jay Jones, have a first black attorney general.
Yeah, we have the black lieutenant governor, but I don't know if she's faring too
we've had a black governor, but we've had vice governor. I mean, that whole thing is all chaos itself. Speaking of radio shows and John Reed and whatnot, so we'll leave them to their own devices on that one.
Hey, Razor, let me tell you how I know you black without saying you black. Our lieutenant governor is a black female, and in her campaigning, she had these building-sized posters of her holding an M16, like an AR-15 or whatever it was, right? Yeah. So now she wants to run for governor, but guess who ain't backing her? The Republicans. But they definitely used her to get her in there for lieutenant governor. Yeah. That's how you know you black without saying you black.
And then between that and what's going on the lieutenant governor's race, because there was two candidates that were running for Republican nomination for lieutenant governor. And one of them was John Reed, who's still running as a nominee now. And the other one was Pat Harrity, who's a supervisor in Fairfax. Pat has gone through some health issues. I believe he recently had a heart attack not too long ago. So he stepped back from that primary, leaving John Reed as the nominee, who's a radio anchor out of Richmond, who also happens to be a gay man married in an interracial marriage. And Republicans have torn themselves apart trying to figure out how to work with John Reed and actually bring him into their ticket. And I'm sure you guys have all seen the stories where they're saying that he has all these social media posts out there and whatnot. And I mean, Republicans, their ticket is not unified right now.
I got a question for you. Okay. What do we do so that we don't run into the problem of just because somebody's black running for office, that other people say that's the only reason that we're voting for them? Like, they don't look at their credentials. They don't look at anything, their resume, nothing. It's just a fact of, okay, they're black. That's why you're voting for them. How do we get them out of that?
I wish that had worked in 2024, because then we wouldn't be in what the scenario we have right now.
Big facts.
I don't know if there's a ton of voters that are really basing it off of that. I mean, I think, of course, there's always a contingent of voters that do want to vote in alignment with demographics, which I think that makes sense from a representative point of view.
So you don't think black people vote for somebody just because they're black?
I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that do that.
I'm sure it's a lot of them.
I mean,
I was one of them.
But it's no different than somebody who will vote for a white opponent because they don't want to vote somebody.
But how do you get past the ideology? Now that I'm older now, I'm looking at it like, okay, how do I? Because if I can't change your mindset about something, your prejudices, then you're not going to look at who's the best candidate for the job. So how do we get past it? We watch that in a lot of people's opinion when it, like you said, 2024.
Yeah, and I think, kind of one of the interesting things that we're seeing a lot of in the news cycles right now is a lot of these polls, kind of these regretting voters polls on forward with this blueprint that Republican chaos is leaving for us.
I think that, if I humbly say this, right? I couldn't disagree with you more, because while somebody may be painting a picture like, man, you show that y'all just can't govern us, right? The fact that you're telling people what's wrong with them will continually make them not come to your side. So in my 50 years, getting ready to be 51 years, I've learned that, okay, a person can be dead wrong, but if you can find a way to leave them with respect, then you stand a better chance of getting them to understand your viewpoint. Well, yeah, and the way you just said it wasn't that way.
Well, I'd say probably misinterpret it, because what I'm arguing here is that it's important for us to lay the groundwork and demonstrate that Republicans aren't governing effectively. That doesn't mean you have to disrespect somebody. That means reminding somebody that perhaps if they have a grandparent that relies on Medicaid to have their long-term care paid for, that is on the chopping block. That's not disrespecting anybody. That's just reminding them that this is the chaos that we're working through right now.
I got you.
So, and I think there is a way to
Like
get
Candace Owens.
yeah, and Candace Owens has had like a complete 180. I don't know what's going on over there. We don't hear from her anymore. I mean, they abandoned her, and she don't know what to do anymore. So, I mean, I think there's a way that we can absolutely do this respectfully, and I think folks are attentive and engaged right now because I've talked to plenty of Republicans that are like, well, what is going on? Veterans are being fired. Federal employees being fired arbitrarily. Funding for critical programs. And we were talking about this before, money for Ready Kids locally. I mean, people support organizations like Ready Kids. They do an important role in our community. They're doing thankless work with children that are impacted by traumatic events. And our congressmen won't explain why they're losing their congressional earmark. And those are the conversations that people need to be having. And again, Republicans are painting a good picture for us because there's a lot to work with. And that's exactly why Congressman McGuire won't have a town hall in Charlottesville.
Yeah, and it's up to us to educate ourselves because I feel like, Razor, to your point, I feel like that's us amplifying the qualifications, right? Because for all the people who said first black president, I'm gonna vote for President Obama, it was like there was to me, I believe there was a higher percentage of folks who said this is a qualified brother. And that's why I'm voting for him. Because we can look at like people like Herman Cain and other folks who've come up, and plenty of black people have been like, nah, I ain't voting for that dude, even though he's black. You know what I mean?
Who's the housing secretary?
So,
Ben Carson. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so there's been examples, but Jason, thank you. Thank you as always, man. Continue blessings and success until next time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job.